Hi everyone, welcome to Freesat Spares. I thought I'd quickly go over the technical information about the satellite beams that come down from the satellites up in space. So I'm going to use a website called SatBeams to illustrate what we call the footprints of the satellite. So when a satellite is sent up in space, it generally has lots of ways and positions to transmit on. You will find satellites that serve Europe can also serve Africa and the Middle East by using directional changes in the transmission equipment on the satellite itself. With the more modern satellites, they can be very much manipulated to target beams to quite small areas compared to the older systems that were first launched back in the 80s. So on SatBeams, there's a really useful tool, and the main reason we're going to talk about this is understanding whether or not you can receive your country's TV when you're not in your country. So if you're in a caravan or you're an expat living abroad, what can you find and what channels can you watch when you are not in your home country through satellite? So on the website, we're going to click the footprints button, and it's going to load a strange looking map of the world. And as I'm based in the UK, we're going to zoom in to the UK area. Now, currently, you can see these coloured areas over the map, and this is a footprint. The darker the colour, the stronger the signal. Really simple to understand. What we're looking at the moment, as you can see here, this is the satellite, a Q-band satellite sat at 1 degree west, so that's practically dead south. And that satellite is Thor 7. But if you look across all of these... Oh, hang on, sorry, there's actually 4 satellites at this position. So we've got Thor 5, Thor 6, Thor 7, and Intelsat 10-2. All of these options here are what they call the spot beams. So if I click, so I assume we are on CEE. If I click on spot 1 instead, you can see the transmission from Thor 7 at 1 degree 1 degree west is concentrated over this area, so Sweden and Finland essentially. Very, very tight small beam that just covers that. Outside of these areas, you are going to need absolute massive. So if we click in the center of the colored beam, okay, it doesn't know the power of the beam on this one. Let's try another one. Okay, so these bad ones to choose. Let's go for Intelsat because I'm pretty sure I know that this one will display. There we go. So, like I said, the deeper the color, the stronger the signal. So generally where the origin of the signal is that's where the strongest signal is going to be. So looking at Intelsat 10, spot 1 beam, if we move the little tag around, it shows that, gives you the power level, and it recommends a antenna size. It says antenna, but we would call them dishes, or parabolic antennas, I guess is the actual size. Even gives you it in inches if you're old school. So 50 centimeters, that's a very small dish. That's the same size as a Zone 1 Sky dish, basically. So you can use quite a small dish to get this signal in these areas. Now if we click, so if we wanted to receive channels off this satellite, but we are in Spain, we're in sort of middle of Spain, if we click down here, you can see there's a lighter color band and it says we need at least a 65 centimeter dish. Great, that's really useful information, but what does it how does it help us? Let's just hop over before we move on. I'll explain more in a moment, but before we move on, let's go over to Astra 2, which is 28 degrees east, which is the satellite that most of us use for Sky, FreeSat, English-based TV, really. So here we see, let's just zoom out slightly. Here we see, obviously, the United Kingdom, good signal, needs a 55 centimeter dish, no problem. And that is on Astra 2F Europe. If we move to 2E Europe, you see it's a very similar pattern and we need the same size dish. And then if we go to 2G, we only need a 48 centimetre dish. But actually, there's a cut through in the UK. If you look, actually, we get slightly stronger signals in the south than we do the north, only very slightly. So that's great. If we are setting up a temporary satellite dish, we know what signals we might be able to receive by using this map. What you will also find, again, like with all satellite dishes, they have multiple spot beams. So if I click on 2G spot, it's literally concentrated as a satellite beam just for the UK. You might get it if you're sort of in Guernsey, Jersey, okay, and maybe Paris. But the moment you step outside, you know, it's saying we can't get a signal. So it's basically got zone 1, 50 centimeters, zone 2, 65. But outside of these two areas, we are not getting that signal. Now, what actually happens with satellite signals is you will find that things like Sky, which serve Sky TV UK, Sky B, which serve the UK, are over time concentrating their channels and their beams to the UK using these spot transmissions. So they're a lot less receivable, if that's a word, outside of the UK. But you're still good if you're up in this area of France around Paris, or you're going to be good when you're in your caravan with your zone 1 or 50 centimeter satellite dish. So lots of questions we get is, what about if I live in Spain? Wow, that's interesting. So if we go to the Astra 2F Europe sat beam, we can see most of Spain, north of Alicante area, is covered with this Astra 2F Europe beam and with the Astra 2E Europe beam, and even though the signal's a little weaker, with the Astra 2G beam. Are you going to ask what happened to Astra A, B, C, D? Well, they're all dead. They're no longer in service, or they've been moved to provide other services at other positions nowadays. With the development of digital technology, the amount of channels they can push through a single transponder is increased. So less satellites are needed at each position to supply the same amount of communications or TV channels. So we've got a lot of expats that live in the Alicante sort of area here. So it looks like to me most people are going to be able to receive a lot of channels that are broadcast on these Europe beams quite easily with a fairly small, with an 80 centimeter dish on average would do you fine. But what happens if we go for the spot beam? So let's see where Astra 2F spot is transmitting to. Literally concentrated in the UK. Now that doesn't mean that you necessarily couldn't get a signal down here in Spain outside of the area, outside of the main transmission area. But what it does, there's two things that will happen. You will need a massive dish, and you'll see them all over this coast of Spain, a 2.4 meter dish, really, really big, you know, looks like it's the size of a car sort of thing. People do have those. People definitely do have those. But what you will still experience, even with a dish that size, is signal loss during the night and day, depending on the atmospheric conditions of what's going on. There are loads of guys who work in these areas that really know their stuff. So if you're living there, it's quite easy for them to give you the right equipment that you need to pick up what signals you can. So you may have the option to just get a signal, but it will be a limited signal. So you may get some of the main channels, a few of the BBC channels, you know, Channel 5 and things like that, but you might not get other channels because they'll be transmitting on different beams which have different footprints. Hopefully that's nice and clear.